Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to EGGA. I'm talking to you about plain English and its importance in writing any sort of grant application, large or small. Getting your message across is really important. So let's just have a look. First of all, me, what am I doing here? As Sophie's been kind enough to say, I've been giving this talk for a little while, but I'm a lay person. I've got no medical training, but I'm what the NIHR call an expert by experience. So at the risk of boring you, I've been a type 2 diabetic for about 35 years now, and I've been a volunteer in several major trials for diabetes drugs. I'm a member of the Research Support Services Advisory Board. I'm on the Diabetic Eye Screening Research Advisory Committee, and I'm a PPI on a number of projects. Some run out of Southampton and some run out of Oxford. And I've perhaps my most recent job was a co-applicant on a project that evaluated the NHS app, and as a result of that, gave evidence to the Health and Social Care Committee. And I've been on several NIHR funding committees. So that's just a little bit about me and why I'm taking up some of your time this afternoon. Well, you may think it's obvious. I know what I've written about. It must be obvious to everybody. But I wonder if it is. Let's just have a look at the elephant. I wonder how many legs you think it's got. Um, hmm, one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. That's an odd elephant, isn't it? And what about the cricket stumps? How many have we got? One, two, three, four. Oh, that's a little bit odd, isn't it? Hmm. Well, unfortunately, when we write, it may not be quite as obvious as we think. Here's an extract from a Fortune 500 company's annual report. Your management is fully incented to identify value-added enhancements as we build momentum by selectively outsourcing shareholder value in the interest of maximizing incentive compensation. As in every year in our company's history, once again this year we have eliminated waste and increased market-leading growth potential by streamlining our world-class quality and innovation, using a wide value mix to make major strides in integrating operating strategies to realize all of the margin benefits available. I hope you know what that says, because personally I haven't got a clue. But you're saying, well, that's a private company. That would never happen in the public sector. Let's have a look at an example from the West Hampshire Clinical Commissioning Group. In deciding whether a person has a primary health need, the representatives will consider whether the nursing or other services required by that person are A, where the person is or will be accommodated in a care home, more than incidental or ancillary to the provision of accommodation which a local authority is or would be, but for a person's means under a duty to provide, or B, of a nature beyond which a local authority whose primary responsibility is to provide social services could be expected to provide, and if it decides that the nursing or other health services required do, when considered in their totality, fall within paragraph A or B, it must decide that the person has a primary health need. So I hope that's abundantly clear to you, and indeed to anyone who might need some sort of health care. Let's have a look at an example that I was sent of a research project a number of years ago that was to take part in Oxford. You're being invited to take part in the effect of sitagliptin on glycemic control in type 1 diabetes study that will take place in the Clinical Research Unit CRU at the Oxford Centre for Diabetes Endocrinology and Metabolism, OCDEM. Churchill Hospital, Oxford will perform the study, in which has been approved by a local ethics committee. Well, I'm afraid my lung capacity isn't sufficient to read that at one go. And having read it, I'm still not really sure what it's about. So let's have a look. Here's the, if you like, the official definition of this project written in summary form. And I'm not going to read it all, but let's see what the effect is on the public. Here's the doctor, and she's saying, they'll be queuing up for this one. This is such an exciting research project. Everyone will want to take part. But the nurse is saying, yes, doctor, it's a very interesting study. And then he's saying to a patient, as a diabetic, you are more at risk of a heart problem. Are you interested in taking part in a trial to see if statins or fish oil may help you? And a hard-pressed patient is saying, that I can understand. So writing in terms that the public can understand is really important in any grant application. Let's have a look at another piece of writing. Here's some words. I won't say more than that. It says, Dear John, I want a man who knows what love is all about. You are generous, kind, thoughtful. People who are not like you admit to being useless and inferior. You have ruined me for other men. I yearn for you. I have no feelings whatsoever when we're apart. I can be forever happy. Will you let me be yours, Gloria? And I just want you to answer a simple question. How does Gloria feel about John? Does she love him? Does she hate him? You don't know. Well, the reason you can't tell is in those words, there is no punctuation. And punctuation is really important because, as I'll show you in a moment, it can alter the sense of something completely. And there's one really good thing about punctuation. When you're writing a grant application, it doesn't add to your word count at all. So let's have a look and see. So in the first one, it's exactly the same words in both of these, but the punctuation is different in both. So let me read them. In the left-hand one, it says, Dear John, I want a man who knows what love is all about. You are generous, kind, thoughtful. People who are not like you admit to being useless and inferior. You've ruined me for other men. I yearn for you. I have no feelings whatsoever when we're apart. I can be forever happy. Will you let me be yours, Gloria? And in the right hand section, we have the same words but different punctuation. Dear John, I want a man who knows what love is. All about you, a generous, kind, thoughtful people who are not like you. Admit to being useless and inferior. You have ruined me. For other men I yearn. For you I have no feelings whatsoever. When we're apart, I can be forever happy. Will you let me be yours, Gloria? They're the same words, but different punctuation. So let's have a look at some other bits of writing. And let's have a look at the number of words in some documents. Well, in the Ten Commandments, there are 135 words. In the American Declaration of Independence, 300. In the US Department of Agriculture Directive on Pricing of Cabbages, which I know you've all read, 15,000. In the European legislation on smoking, all but 25,000. And in the Brexit agreement, 586,000. So I wonder if the longer documents are actually the plainer ones that are easier to read. Well, when we're talking about writing plain, understandable English, I have copied without any hesitation from the Plain English campaign, and there's the link to them, and you'll find a lot of useful information and a lot of helpful guidance. But let's just summarize some of the main points. First of all, you'll sometimes see documents with this crystal mark on them. That means they've been approved as satisfying the Plain English campaign. And here are some tips. An average sentence should be no longer than around 15 or 20 words. Try and be punchy. Vary your writing style by mixing short sentences and longer ones. Try and stick to one idea per sentence. And if you write a long sentence, try and break it up. You may be trying to get several ideas across, but don't cram them all into one sentence. It makes understanding it more difficult. Remember, if we go back to school, most sentences have a subject, a verb, and an object. That means something, the subject, does, that's the verb, something to something else, and that's the object. Try and use active verbs. Peter watches television is active, whereas the television was watched by Peter is passive. Use you and we. There's nothing wrong with them. So you must send us, for example, rather than, as you will see in many advertisements, applicants must send us. Don't say the packet should be removed from the box. The contents should then be placed in the oven. Be direct. Remove the packet from the box, then place it in the oven. It's much simpler. It's much more understandable. Something else to avoid are what we call nominalizations. So, for example, you might have a word like complete, but the nominalization of it is completion. And people are often tempted to use a nominalization because they think it sounds more impressive. So, for example, rather than introduce, introduction. Instead of provide, provision. For fail, failure. For arrange, for arrangement. For investigate, investigation. They're just longer words, and actually they don't make the understanding any easier. And here are some words you might want to avoid. Additional, which means extra. Applicant, you. Commence, start. Consequently, which means so. In respect of, for. Per annum, a year. Prior to, before. And two that the medical profession always seem to love. Procedure and intervention, which to most members of the public means an operation, or an adverse event, which to the public means you're going to die. So try and avoid those if you possibly can.
Adverse event? Means it's so
I started my life as a printer, and here is a very important message I was taught very early on. When you're trying to get a message across, here's the rule. What is it? When is it? Where is it? Why is it? Keep those four in mind always when you're trying to write or promote something. Write in simple English for at least both the plain English summary and the PPI sections. NIHR will expect that. But let me also say that all the very learned people on a panel who have got probably several qualifications in your specialist subject will undoubtedly read your application in the last few minutes before the meeting, and if you write in plain English, there's a chance they'll read it. If you write in what you think of as highly technical language, they may well ignore it. And just a reminder that punctuation is free. You won't exceed your word count by using punctuation. And you will alter the meaning and the readability of it. And that brings me on to readability indices. A well-known one is the Gunning Fog Index, but I'm not promoting that. There are many such indexes, and they can give you an assessment of how readable something is. So if we look at Gunning Fog, it's a measure of the readability of English writing. And if you're writing for a fairly wide audience, you need a fog index of less than 12. If you need something for almost universal understanding, the lower the better. And here's what the numbers relate to. 17 is probably understandable by a graduate. 13 by an undergraduate, 12 by a sixth former, 9 by a high school pupil, and I'm afraid we come down to 6 or below for the red top readers. In the example that I desperately tried to read earlier about sitagliptin, the Gunning Fog Index is actually 30. So as you can see, it's almost non-understandable. Well, let's try and learn a little bit from and understand some great speakers. Why are they great speakers? Well, because they all communicate clearly and concisely. And first of all, I'd like to mention this gentleman. His name is Hywel Williams, and he was brought up in the South Wales Valley in a little village called Cwmr Afan. And he attended the local comprehensive school, but then went on to King's College London, where he trained in dermatology. And he was the first person to publish an article about the possibility of dogs, by their sense of smell, being able to detect skin cancer. Now, if you ever go and have the opportunity to hear Hywel speak, even if his talk is called Watching Paint Dry, make every effort to go. He is an absolutely fascinating speaker who will have you engrossed throughout his talk. Here's another person. This is actually Sir Jonathan Van Tam. And you may remember seeing him on the television quite a lot during COVID. He graduated in medicine from the University of Nottingham. Why is he a good speaker? Well, partly it's his manner. He speaks gently and he's got great composure, but also his use of language. He spoke much more simply and engagingly, often than the other scientists and certainly the politicians alongside him. And as far as possible, he speaks in plain English. He uses metaphors and analogies drawn from everyday life, Things like football, train journeys, and so on, things that we all experience and all have some knowledge of. And on the rare occasions he does resort to specific jargon, it's often in a very wry way. For example, he mentioned the South African variant of COVID, which in the trade we know as B1.351. And finally, I hope you all recognise this gentleman, Sir Winston Churchill, who also was a great orator. Just before I read his bit, I should mention that when I was a youngster, many, many years ago, we didn't have the paper sizes that we have these days. So A4, for example, didn't exist, but a similar size was called foolscap. And this is what Churchill wrote to his ministers. Pray, state this day, on one side of a sheet of foolscap, how the Royal Navy is being adapted to meet the conditions of modern warfare. Well, if someone can explain how the Royal Navy is being adapted to the conditions of warfare on one side of a sheet of paper, perhaps you don't need to write quite as many pages as you first thought.